Good morning and welcome to this episode of Exploring Cognitive Biases. I'm Duncan Price from Mind Affinity, psychotherapist, hypnotherapist and coach, and I get to spend my time empowering people to help themselves to overcome whatever barriers are getting in their way. So this series is all about cognitive biases. If you haven't seen my introduction video that explains more about what cognitive biases are, feel free to head to my YouTube channel or look back on my Facebook page and you'll be able to find that. Just search Mind Affinity. You should be able to find it easily enough. So yes, cognitive biases, short version, are shortcuts that we take when it comes to making decisions. So if we had to process all of the information that we receive consciously all the time, it would get very tiring. So we take little shortcuts to make it quicker and easier for ourselves. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, by the way. And thank you to anyone who's watching this back on the replay. If you are watching on the replay, let me know in the comments. Just hashtag replay. Tell me where and when you're watching from. It'd be great to know. And if you're watching live, give me a hello or some thumbs up or something. Let me know you're out there. So today's cognitive bias is the Barnum effect. Which is all about Barnum statements, etc. I will explain it in a little bit. But before I do, let me just talk about you for a minute. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. So if you're watching this right now, I can see a few people watching. Hello, people. I'm going to offer some statements, some observations about you. If you're watching this right now, at this time on a Thursday morning, then firstly, I think you're awesome. I think you're awesome because you're watching me, and that's nice because it inflates my ego more. But also, I reckon, hi Liz, how you doing? Let me know how many of the following statements you feel are relevant to you or apply to you. Now, this isn't the perfect setting for doing this, so there'll be some fluctuation here, but let's see how many of these statements you feel initially, without double guessing and questioning it based on the fact that I'm asking this on a live video, but how many of these statements do you think you would normally easily believe apply to you? First, you have a great need for other people to like and admire you. Or that could be worded slightly better to say that you enjoy being liked. Good to be able to see me today. Thanks, Liz. Good to be able to see you too in the comments. So that's number one. Number two, you have a tendency to be critical about yourself. Number three, you have a great deal of unused capacity that you have not yet turned to your advantage. Number four, while you do have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them with your strengths. Number five, your sexual adjustment has presented some problems for you. So, while you were developing and experiencing and exploring sexually, there has been some challenges along the way. 6, disciplined and self-controlled outside, you tend to be more worrisome and less secure on the inside. So you can come across often as being more confident and in control than you may feel internally. 7, at times you do have serious doubts as to whether you've made the right decisions or done the right things. 8, you prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. 9, you pride yourself as an independent thinker and don't accept others' statements without satisfactory proof, without checking it for yourself. 10, you have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. So maybe you like to get to know someone a bit more first before you reveal anything too personal about yourself. 11, at times you can be extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times more introverted, wary, and reserved. Sometimes you like to really put yourself out there. Other times you like to take some time for yourself. 12, some of your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic. Some of them. And 13, security is important to you. So feeling safe, feeling secure is a goal in your life. Okay, so let me know in the comments, and this is true on the replay as well, because it's always good to look back. How many of those, so out of 13, roughly, how many do you think either strongly apply to you or absolutely could apply to you? So while I wait for the little delay on Facebook that always comes up, let me know how many you think are relevant. I can see some people are already saying yes, and number 2, definitely tend to be critical of yourself, for example. So these statements are actually known as Barnum statements. These specific 13 were used in one of the early experiments back in, I don't remember the date. So right, all except number 8, brilliant. And 8 was, you prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. You missed the first 5, but the rest sounded like I was describing you. Absolutely. So the first 5 just quickly were, you have a great need for people to like and admire you. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. You have a great deal of unused capacity that you've not turned to your advantage. And while you have some personality weaknesses, you're generally able to compensate for them. Those were the first 4. So I think they'll be relevant. 6, I think they're quite varied though. 8 apply. 8 in total, but I lost count of numbers. Yeah, cool. So you see how for most people, the majority of them apply to them. And that's, I personally would word them slightly differently if I was specifically aiming for the effect that I would be looking for. But effectively, those questions worded in that way, yeah, I thought you'd say that, Sam. Yeah, those questions are worded in that way because change stresses you out. Do you know what? Change stresses everyone out to some extent. The good thing is that can actually be a really positive thing. You can use that stress during change to your advantage to propel you forward and give you the energy you need to do more. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about why these statements feel so relevant, even though they are relatively arbitrary. And it's not just, it's actually very much not because of the wording on some of them. So this can be used in a number of different ways. The experiment where these questions specifically came from was to test how people react and respond to statements, vague statements like that, about our personalities. So the Barnum effect itself is that we as humans have a natural cognitive bias and tendency to want to accept things that people are describing about our personalities, right? This is why you can do one of those internet quizzes on what type of bread you would be. I don't know, give me some examples in the comments of the most ridiculous ones you've seen. And you can carry out one of those tests and answer the questions and get to the end and go, that's weirdly accurate. It's not weirdly accurate. It's just that we want it to be accurate and we perceive it that way and we take those statements on board, especially when those statements are more positive about us. We like to hear positive things about ourselves. And things like, you have a tendency to be critical to yourself. Well, yeah, of course. And part of it as well is that when we mention things like, you have a tendency to be critical, if you're questioning that, what you do is you look and go, are there times when I've been critical? Yes, of course there are. To say that you have a tendency to be critical of yourself, you're completely ignoring any tendency you may have to be nice about yourself. So of course, we're all at some point going to be critical of ourselves. It's called being human, right? And then there's a great one here. Where is it? So number 11 that I mentioned. At times you are extrovert, affable, sociable, while at other times you can be introverted, wary, and reserved. That's basically like saying sometimes you're full of energy and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you like to socialize, sometimes you like to be on your own. Well, duh. Like, we all have moments where we want to do one or the other. And even the most extrovert person still enjoys taking time to themselves at points. And even the most introverted person enjoys being in social settings sometimes. So yes, we absolutely do the same with horoscopes. We want it to be relevant. We want it to apply. Morning, Tristan. Thanks for tuning in. So here's a great example of the Barnum effect at play. And this is somewhere where you need to watch out for this cognitive bias. So yeah, the bias in itself is simply that when being given information about our personality, we have a tendency to want to accept that information as being relevant, regardless of actually questioning it. So a great example of how I've used this, an example of two things here. One thing is a great example of why this bias can be less than helpful at times, and what to watch out for and what to be aware of. It's also a great example of how you can turn this and use this to your advantage. At least I did in this setting. Cognitive bias is important to be aware of. Different situations bring out different bits of us, both good and bad. You are absolutely right, Tristan. Cognitive biases play a huge part, and it's normal and it's human and it's great, but it is important to be aware of them, because that's how you make better decisions, by knowing what that decision is based on. If you're aware that you're going to have certain biases, like for example, if there's someone you really, really like because they're really awesome, then it's much easier to accept them doing things that you would otherwise question other people for, but see them doing it and it's absolutely fine because you like them, and vice versa. So it's really easy to fall into these traps. Anyway, where was I going with this? Yes, so real life example then of how I've used it. And it gets used a lot by there's cold reading and warm reading. I don't know if you've heard of them. So cold reading is basically using statements kind of like these to make it sound like you're being really specific about that individual, when really you could be talking about anyone, which then makes them believe that you're being accurate about them, which can then lead to warm reading, which is very similar, but understanding and basing it on bits that you do know about that person, whether that's research separately or whether that's getting them to give you answers to questions so that you can be more specific. Fake mediums are really good at using and abusing that to manipulate people, which is uncool. Anyway, yes, awareness is always key. So yeah, here's my real life example of how I use this to actually help someone as a client. And I won't mention their name, but I know they wouldn't mind if I did, because they tell everyone about it anyway. But some time ago, I was working with a client who had a sex and love addiction, two separate addictions, both closely related. But yeah, she was a sex addict, and it caused some real challenges for her, some huge challenges. She's better now, which is great. And one of the things that we did, we did an experiment. So she came for her session, she came to my office, and I said, right, we're going outside. Well, I want to do this privately. I was like, yeah, trust me, no one will see, it's all good, but we're going outside for a bit. Okay. I don't like to just do things the normal way. I like to mix things up a bit. So we went outside, and we stood down the side of my office building that I was in at the time. And I said, right, I've written this specifically about you. And I had like a page and a half of A4 that I'd written specifically about her. I hadn't, not at all, but she didn't know that. It was something that I'd written years previously, specifically to demonstrate this whole cold reading thing and how well it can work. So yeah, I told her that it was written specifically about her. And what I wanted her to do is, anytime I made a statement that she felt absolutely was specific to her, take a big step forward. Anytime I made a statement that she felt was true, but not specifically aimed at her, like, yeah, that could apply to anyone, stay still. And anytime I said something that she disagreed with or didn't think was about her or relevant, to take a big step back. So as I read through these statements and start discussing it, she's taking big steps forward, occasionally staying still. By recollection, I don't believe she took a step back at any point, but she may have done. If she did, it was only one or two, because it didn't take long before we were right at the front of the building, walking into a bush by the car park. At which point I said, okay, we'll stop there. My point has been made. Let's go back upstairs. And then I explained to her, I completely made that up. It was not about her at all. It was specifically vague and generalized. But the reason for doing that is that she had come across a book all about sex addiction, and it was a very useful book, and it really helped her, and I wouldn't take that away from her at all. That's fantastic. However, one of the things that happened as a result of this is once she read this book, she started to notice more challenges and problems relating to her issue, her challenge, which were part of what was covered in that book. Effectively, what happened is she'd read this book, or while reading this book, she'd associated with it, created or identified with that label of sex addict. And then when you know that, just like reading the side effects on your medication, and you look at all the side effects, and as you're reading through, you're like, oh, actually, now you mention it, yeah, because you're becoming aware of and looking for those issues. So to an extent, that's what had happened. She was reading this book, and so much of it did apply to her that the stuff that didn't apply, she started to look for and effectively create for herself. Yeah, so Tristan, what you're talking to there, relating to this, buying a new car, suddenly there's more of that car on the road. Untrue, but we notice them more. Spot on. That's called cognitive differentiation. And in fact, I think I already covered a video on this in this series. So check out my YouTube channel, YouTube/mind_affinity, I think, where you can check that one out and find out more. Like Dr. Google diagnosis, you could have everything under the sun, absolutely. And like, there's a proper name for this, and it escapes me right now, but first year med student syndrome, I'm going to call it, which is when med students on their first year have to look into obviously loads of different illnesses, ailments, diseases, etc., and the various different symptoms of them, and they tend to get very ill because they're spending all of this time looking at all of these different symptoms, and it's very easy to go, oh yeah, I've got that, even if you're a bloke and that is menstrual cramps, I don't know, but it's a very well-known thing that happens to first year med students. They actually discuss it and talk about it and regularly check in on it through the year, which is quite interesting. Anyway, back to this particular bias. So, thanks for the link, Tristan. Really appreciate that. Cheers, buddy. So, yes, with that, I then we then went back to my office, and I explained to her that I'd made all that up, that was written before I even knew her. Well, actually, I knew her, but before I knew her as a client, and that it was in no way about her, which helped her to realize and to see that, yes, she definitely had some of the challenges, and understanding that label and seeing that she's not alone was helpful, but that she doesn't need to take on all of those suggestions within that book and create that for herself as well. And we did a lot more work around it from there, but that really helped her to see things differently and to change that perspective, rather than accepting that label and thinking then she has to tick every other box and create even more problems for herself. So that's an example of how the Barnum effect can be really useful. And a great example of it in play in both situations. So when she first read the book, and also when I did the piece of work with her. So be wary of anything that is speaking of your personality, and certain personality tests you want to watch out for as well. Some of them are a lot more accurate than others, have had a lot more work and research gone into them. So Myers-Briggs and DISC personality profiles, for example, are both far more reliable than a lot of other ones that are out there. So yeah, treat anything that anyone says to you about your personality with a pinch of salt, because we have a natural tendency to want to accept it more. If that helps you and it's a good thing, then go for it, embrace it, enjoy it. If it's not, then don't let it get in your way. Don't let some belief about or suggestion about your personality stop you from achieving what you're capable of in life. That's the lesson from today, and that is the Barnum effect, also known as the Forer effect, F-O-R-E-R, if you want to research it further. So that's today's video on cognitive bias. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do check out the others in the series. There is a whole playlist of them on my YouTube channel, the link for which Tristan has very kindly put in the comments, or at least he's put them in the comments there. That's not the easiest link for you to copy, so just head to YouTube and search mind_affinity, I think, and you should find it. You're very welcome. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. And yes, just a reminder, awareness is always key with all of these cognitive biases. Thank you, Adele. Being aware of them allows you to control for them better. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Don't know what I'm going to cover next week, but it will be another cognitive bias. And if you've got any suggestions or questions about why we think the way we do, why humans behave the way we do, how we make our decisions, or you've heard of other cognitive biases and you'd like more information on them, let me know. Get in touch. Drop me a message or comment below, and I will make sure that I include that for you. Cool. You're very welcome. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. And if you want more, if YouTube and Facebook aren't enough, then you can subscribe to my weekly email of positivity, a burst of positivity to your inbox every week. Just head to mindaffinity.co.uk/contact, or just head to Mind Affinity and click contact from the menu, and you can sign up to receive Monkey Cool, which is written by the Mind Affinity monkey Bananas. Cool. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day. Cheers.